Hey everybody, DC Hewitt here from Fantasy Basketball Analyzer. Thanks for watching the Wednesday edition of the show, which really is more of a podcast. Is bringing in my buddy Shad, and we talk through how we built our DraftKings lineups for Wednesday, January 8th. We recorded it last night, so you're going to hear things like me talking about Giannis as if he's not playing, because he's listed as probable or questionable with both soreness and illness, and the Golden State matchup that might not need him. Obviously, I didn't know then or now yet if he's going to play. So you may know more out there in internet land if you're watching this closer to tip off. So any injury talk, double check that, take it with a grain of salt. This was us trying to build our lineups and get you the best advice we could and talk through really what our thought process was, helping set our preliminary lineups and pool of players that we're looking for. So you will hear why we like Eric Gordon, Trae Young, Michael Porter Jr. tonight. How we wish James Harden was cheaper because it's really hard to build a lineup around him. We don't talk on Kemba Walker or Bradley Beal at all because we didn't know their health status. It's sounding now like Kemba might be able to play for the first time in like 3 games, so maybe that changes some things. But thanks for clicking. Thanks for watching or listening. Let's turn on the internet and get to the show. Hey, Shad, welcome back. Let's set our lineups for tomorrow's game, although when they're watching it, it's today, Wednesday the 8th. Welcome to the new year of DFS. Here we go. Now starts our win streak.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Good to be back and doing this again. Holidays were a little bit tough.
Yeah, especially for this being our regular show time and it being Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve is like, I don't think this is going to come.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's dive right in, especially because we've got some crossover here. Who you got at the number 1 spot?
So playing the point for me is Trae Young. Last game against Houston, it was just a barn burner, even though Houston kind of really ran them out of the building. It was like 158 to 111. So I went with Trae Young. I think he had like 34 points and 7 assists that game. But really, it's at 9-7. Kind of looking at his last game, he's kind of got on a hot streak coming off. So he had 29 points last game, got 52 fantasy points. And then the game before that, he had 41 fantasy points 41 actual points with 62 fantasy points. He's going to get you the assists. The crazy part is, he's still shooting just threes that are at a good tick. Last game he was 4 for 5. So hopefully that hot shooting streak would continue. I don't really want to see a 5 for 13, but I'll take the 5 threes. So I went with Trae Young.
Yep, and so did I. You and I were talking before we started recording. I tried to attack the show right away I was just like, Trae and Harden going at each other. I want them both because Trae can't guard them. And the Harden lineup was just like nearly impossible. I just had to scrap it. But I kept Trae in there. I wasn't going to give up on that game completely.
Harden is so hard to put in. I have a lineup and I don't even want to talk about it because it's just a bunch of people that I'm reaching.
I tried having them both too. So it was Trae at point and Harden at shooting guard, and that's where the budget just instantly blew up and was not going to work. All right, well, you went with your 1 first, so I'll lead off with the 2. So I slotted Chris Middleton in at the 2 spot, partially because I don't know if Giannis is going to be playing. I think he might be out, and they're playing against Golden State, which I'm not really afraid of Golden State nowadays. So it just seemed like the possibility of that uptick, maybe not in minutes, but he's the number 2, maybe the unsexy number 2. People don't get really excited about it, but consistently getting 30 fantasy points can jump up to 41. Now it's 7,000. I really need him to be up in that 41 range. I'm not sure. The last few games, San Antonio doesn't have great defense. Minnesota doesn't have great defense, and he didn't get there, so I don't know that I love it, but it feels like the right play. It's kind of like in poker where you're like, you get dealt whatever. You're like, oh, I got 10 queen. I don't love it, but I gotta see the flop and figure out if this is gonna work out. That was kind of just how I felt about Middleton. I was like, with all the different data points, this is someone I want to roll out there. But if I were to enter multiple lineups, and I probably will have to end up adjusting, we'll talk about that later, depending on injury reports tomorrow. That's something where I'll look. But if I enter multiple lineups, I kind of wanted that shot of who do I think might spike against Golden State.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, going up against Golden State, it's really just, especially if Giannis is out. I mean, yes, he is going to be a focal point of that offense, and Golden State they're a shell of themselves of last year, so they're giving up a ton of points, and that's definitely a really good play.
Before we go, I should just mention that the latest update I see is that he's listed as probable. Giannis, is listed as probable for Wednesday's game against the Warriors, but it's back soreness and an illness, so it kind of felt like it's probable. You think he's going to play, but it's a double whammy. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's one of those things just keeping close, because especially if Giannis is playing, I don't like that 7,100 price tag for Middleton. Yeah. That's somewhere I'd want to pivot off of. Mm-hmm. All right, go ahead.
For my two, I went with Kevin Huerter, Atlanta shooting guard. You'll probably see a trend here with this game. I really feel like it's going to be a barn burner. So at this point, kind of looking like his last couple games, 38 fantasy points, 45 fantasy points, 38 fantasy points against Denver, Indiana, and Boston. So at 6,200, really it's giving me, those 3 games are plus 6 times value. He's kind of hit a hot streak just with his points, 22, 26, and 17. So just kind of looking at it and just knowing that Houston doesn't really play a lot of defense, and either does Atlanta. So I feel like this is just going to be another high-scoring affair with a bunch of threes. And if I'm going to choose guys to choose threes, price-wise, Trae Young and Huerter are good values. So I went with Huerter at my 2.
It's also worth noting that his favorite nickname for himself is Red Velvet.
Yep, I get why they. Looking at his photo, yeah. I understand. And honestly, it's good to see. Coming out of college, I remember that draft. He was basically the best pure shooter of that draft. He's dealt with injuries in the pros, but he's really kind of, the last 4 games, he's really had a good coming out. So,
all right. So for the 3, I've got someone who's been playing real hot. Going against my Bulls, I played Brandon Ingram. He's coming off a 56-point fantasy game. He got 35 points up against Utah. They only lost by 2, but they didn't need overtime or anything. But he played all 39 minutes, hit 3 threes, hit all 8 free throws. Like, the shooting is so much better since he had moved to New Orleans. And it's just solid all around. He doesn't get too many turnovers too, which is nice. Like, that's one of the things with Trey, that in our season-long fantasy leagues we don't play with turnovers, so I kind of forget about the fact that Trey got 7 turnovers the other night. He still has a huge fantasy point, but because the ball's always in his hand the way it is Harden, basically all of the team's turnovers are going to be on his stat line because he's so central to everything they do. So at 8,800, Ingram was up about 400 points to go against the Bulls. And the Bulls have been playing good defense, but I was hoping to ride the hot wave. It's coming off a good game, and despite the Bulls having a good defense, it's still just not a very good team. And Chris Dunn's playing small forward, so Chris Dunn's been stealing the ball, and maybe that'll mean some turnovers. Like, height-wise, there's a difference there. Who do you have at your 3?
At the 3, Russell Westbrook is already listed as being out. He's going to be sitting out that game. So I'm attacking that Houston-Atlanta game again. And I have Eric Gordon. He's recently come back. He played December 29th, the 31st, and on the 3rd. So he's going to start off with 22 minutes, then went 26. Then went 30. He had 28 fantasy points, and then he's 17 and 19. But this game, I got to attack it. And at 4,400 points, all he needs to do is get 24 fantasy points to make it value. And I don't see how he does not get 24 fantasy points in this game. Like I said, last game, they scored 158 points. Albeit James Harden got 60 of that 158. there were still 98 points that were spread out to amongst the other team. And he actually did not play that game. So, looking at it, I had to attack this.
Yeah, I think that's a really good move. And, 4,400, and he's got shooting guard, small forward eligibility. That's the type of guy where, if I find out Giannis is playing and I'm scared to pay Middleton 7,100 price tag, that's the type of person where I might pivot because I didn't end up working Gordon into my lineup yet. But if I can drop down to 4,400 at that Eric Gordon price tag, that frees up $3,000 or whatever for you to flex somewhere else. All right, I've been taking the lead. So who you got at the 4?
At the 4, I went with Michael Porter Jr. He's playing against my Dallas Mavs. No Porzingis. He's kind of been hot and cold. So I'm really, this was kind of my risky move. At 3,800, it's very cheap. Just 3 games ago, he got 33 fantasy points. So you look at that, and that's high value. And then 5 games ago, he got 28 points. His 33 points were against Indiana, and 28 were against Sacramento. Dallas gives up a lot of points, or they're 27th ranked against small forward, power forward eligibility. I think he could potentially get hot in this game, and so that's a guy I went with. Oh, and I forgot to mention that Michael Porter Jr., a big play behind him is the fact that Will Barton is out, so Michael Porter Jr. should have an uptick in minutes as well. So that's good. That was kind of a benefit for having him in there.
Cool. I like it. I had actually looked at the other side of that. I had built Maxi Kleber in the lineup for my first go of it, but I ended up needing to save a little money. Maxi didn't have a great game last game, but he hit, which I don't know, maybe Luka was just too dominant against the Bulls that Maxi didn't. But he's been playing real well with Porzingis out anyway in general. So I thought maybe, but he did the thing I don't like. Not his fault. I guess DraftKings did the thing I didn't like, where he had a down game, but his price went up just because of the matchup. And so I had actually shifted someone we talked about before the game. So I went with Miles Bridges out of Charlotte. They're going against Toronto, which is a good team, obviously, but they're also just so hampered with injuries that I kind of don't know what to expect for the matchup. Last time he played, he got 26 fantasy points. So at 5,000, I don't hate that. That's already 5 times value if he can repeat. But he's coming off of 2 34 fantasy point games, including missing only 1 shot against Indiana in his last matchup. So he's playing really hot. He only took 7 shots, but he still got 34 fantasy points. So that's kind of efficiency that can be great, especially at 5,100. I feel comfortable with that price. Someone came up when you and I were talking about how difficult it is to make a Harden lineup. Was you had to get around that five grand price, and I ended up slotting him in there. Saved me about 400 versus Maxi.
Yeah, and he's not going to. I'm curious. Pascal, I believe, would have gone against him. So he's not going. Yeah, he's not going to have him or OG, him.
But
yeah. So I think he's going to get a little bit lighter defensive matchup against him. I think Pascal is a better defensive player than OG.
Maybe. There's probably things that could back you up. I love OG Anunoby. I don't play him in DraftKings a lot.
Yeah.
But OG is just kind of one of my guys. So take that off the show. No, don't say a bad word about him. All right.
Who'd you go with?
Who's your big man in the middle?
My big man is Dwight Powell. I just kind of looking at it. Porzingis is going to be out. Just kind of looking at the last 2 games. Porzingis has been out for a couple games now. He's averaging about 7 rebounds. He's getting you about 25 to 26 fantasy points. And so with that, at almost 4,900 value, it's a little under that +6 or 6 times value that I like to go for. But going up against Denver, you really don't know what potentially is going to happen with that. So I kind of went with Dwight Powell.
Nice. Your center is more likely to stay in your lineup than my center, which is maybe dumb for doing a show on this. But I rolled the dice. I went with DG. I'm playing Daniel Gafford from Chicago. I believe their second round pick. I tried to play him other times, but against, I believe it was against your Mavs. It was that Wendell Carter just went down, and it was bad. Like, two people had to help him get off the floor, and then he went to the locker room in a wheelchair. So it's listed as a sprained ankle, but I don't see him coming back. And Gafford had a solid game. Coming in somewhat unexpectedly, played 25 minutes and got 27 fantasy points. So he's getting you more than a fantasy point a minute. They jumped his price from $3K to $48K. So he's going to have to do something real. And New Orleans has been playing a lot better. Defense favors his back. But the reason I say it might change is because he's listed as questionable. It says he's probable for his ankle. So he sprained his ankle in Monday's game too. But he got 13 and 8 in 25 minutes. And if I can get a center at 4,800 with that kind of possibility, I like it. If he is out, the Bulls lineup will get weird. Someone will be there of value, but I'm not sure who, right? Because if Wendell Carter's out and Daniel Gafford's out, on their official depth chart, the next center is Luke Cornett. But I have to imagine that maybe they do something more with like Thaddeus Young and Lauri Markkanen. But Lauri Markkanen's listed as probable as well. I'm not sure. I really think that's a thing. But, they haven't had Otto Porter all season, so Chris Dunn's playing small forward. So the Bulls are hitting almost that Toronto-level mess of so many injuries that people might play out of position. So there's probably value there somewhere. Like, if it's not Gafford, someone is going to get extra tick, and those extra minutes could really mean something. All right, let's go with your first flex, right? We're in the guards now.
So in my guard flex, I went with Kendrick Nunn. He started off the season really hot. And then now he's getting about 28, 26 fantasy points. He's only 4,600. And that's, when you're trying to fill out some of these lineups with some of these high dollar guys, you got to search for value. They're going up against Indiana. And the last time they played Indiana, he put up 29.5 fantasy points. So at that point, looking at it, that's over my 6 times value. So at that point, I'm looking at Kendrick Nunn and hoping that, they say that Jimmy Butler's probable with his back issue. So at that point, if he does, if they decide to rest him because of his back, Jimmy Butler is, one that would take a lot of his minutes as well. Then, that would be even more incentive for him. So.
Yeah, I like it. That is the type of thing where that matchup, that Indiana-Miami matchup based on strong defenses is the type of thing that I generally shy away a little bit. Mm-hmm. But you got to play players from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And people will have big games. It's one of those ones that I kind of would overlook just because much like you've got a real Atlanta-Houston theme going on, mm-hmm. and we kind of stay in that lane. Those are guys I kind of miss. But similarly, I almost always avoid Orlando games, and my guy's from Orlando. I played Micah Fultz. He's coming off his career high in points, probably fantasy points, but also just points. He put up 25 points against Brooklyn. Had a good all-around game, 25, 5, and 4. But he just looked good. Like, early in the season when he played, he had in the first week, he had a good dunk, and I was like, oh, Fultz is actually back after burning me for years in my keeper team. And then it's been here and there, but he looked comfortable. He looked better. Mm-hmm. His shot's still awkward as I'll get out, but he looked better. And 40 fantasy points, and he's coming off a 40 fantasy point game at 5K. They jumped him up to 5,800, but he's going against Washington, and Washington's endlessly attackable. Last time he got 32 fantasy points, and at 5,800, I'm okay with 32. But if the hot streak can match what he's able to do against Washington last time, I could see a really big game right there.
Yeah, and hopefully it continues because I know he's had a rough year because of his shoulder. They have been altering his shot to kind of alleviate some of the pressure on that shoulder. So it's been a struggle for him in terms of the shooting. Like you said, he's got an ugly shot. Hopefully this is the turnaround because, he was a good prospect coming out of the draft, and you hate to see the bus. So hopefully this at his value, that's the thing is like as soon as it starts to click, if you can get him low, then on those nights where he's on the uptick, it's definitely going to be you're going to hit very well in value. Who'd you have at the forward utility?
So my forward spot, similar logic to earlier when we talked about Middleton, is I went with Dante DiVincenzo because he's playing against Golden State and he's cheap at 4,200. I don't know if it's weird to say this, but I'm not as worried about Giannis coming back affecting Dante, even though Dante is, he's a bench player and he's getting more minutes when Giannis is out. But at 4,200, his minutes haven't really spiked. Like, he's a consistent 25-minute contributor. And so I'm just hoping for a good game. He's playing about 25 minutes and he's getting about 21 to 25 points in that time. And if he gets that, like, he's not going to light the world on fire for me. Well, maybe. It's Golden State. But I just thought it was safe, right? It says he's averaging 20 fantasy points, like, overall for the season. But he's been averaging a little bit higher lately. And if I can get 5 times value, you want that 6. But I felt comfortable here in a good matchup, and I was just going with that.
With my forward, I went with, now I get to spend money because, I've been saving with my last couple picks. DeMar DeRozan, he's kind of been on a good streak for him. The last 8 games, I believe he's averaged 20 points a game. He's been around that 37 plus fantasy points for the last 5 games, and at 6,800, it's not necessarily as close. I would like it a little bit more for him to be closer to the 42, 44. Going up against Boston, they're about 27th or 21st in opponent ranking, so they're in the lower end for shooting guards and small forwards. They'll probably get teamed up against Tatum. In that instance, it doesn't scare me as much. I think DeRozan can still be able to score on Tatum. So I'm hoping he continues his point streak. And he's actually, been giving me some more stats in assists as well. So last game he had 7 assists, and the game before that he had 5. So if you could do that at this game and get me about 44, 45 fantasy points, I'd be happy with that.
Right on. All right, you did your forward. Why don't you finish us out? Go ahead, and I'll go last.
So I attacked really 2 games here heavily. So with this guy, I think he's just going to dominate the Dallas Mavericks down low with no Kristaps Porzingis. I don't really know. I like Dwight Powell. I just don't think he'll be able to handle Nikola Jokic, the Joker. He's coming off last game 72 fantasy points. He had his best game of the season, 47 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists. So I don't expect him to put 47 points up against the Mavs. I would love that, and the Mavs still win. But I see him kind of, the last time that they played, he had a triple-double. It was 10, 10, and 10. So, at this point, if he could give me a 20 and 10, I'd be happy with that. But at 92, I'm kind of looking for about 56 points around there. So, I could use anywhere between that 72 and from last game and about 48. If he gets me somewhere in between there, I'm happy with it. But it's
a pretty big spread.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, these guys, the basketball players, you're really playing kind of like the game. And if you look at it, who do you do it against? Atlanta, who doesn't really play defense. So I should have probably attacked Atlanta centers more. But against Washington, he only put up 35. But, against Memphis, he put up 65. So against Dallas, I think Dallas has doesn't really have anybody that's going to match up that great with him. I think he's going to be able to score.
Yeah, well, and if that's true, that's exactly how he will have done it against Atlanta. They watching that game, they just let him take distant shots. They're just like, all right, well, let's just see what happens. And he killed him from 3. I don't know if you've got the stats in front of you because you were just talking about it, but he killed it. So you're talking about attacking the Atlanta bigs.
He was 4 of 8. Yep.
Yeah, for a big man, I mean,
Yeah.
he's been shooting something like under, I don't remember what his 3-point stat for the year is, but I was looking at it earlier because during the game I was going, whoa, what's going on? But you were saying maybe should have attacked the Atlanta bigs just because Jokic went off the other night. I had looked at that and you and I had talked with Clint Capela. I couldn't make him fit in the lineup. He took a big price jump against Atlanta. But with that, Clint Capela is not known for being a shooter either. So if the way Jokic really found his value was by Atlanta not guarding him well enough for the offense, Capela's going to have to do his Capela things, which easily could be a 20-20 double-double. Not the year, but the 20 points, 20 rebounds, because he could probably get down there and push around John Collins plenty fine. But I didn't have money left for that at all. Technically, I have 500 sitting around, but that's for making changes later with some of my injury.
Yeah.
I got to make some last-minute changes here based on some iffy plays I've got. But I went with Eric Pascal to close out. So I stayed in that Milwaukee Golden State matchup. Pascal just returned to the starting lineup after being kind of bumped around from coming off the bench and stuff. He only got 18 fantasy points, but at 4,000, it's not terrible. It's not great. It was against Sacramento. But I like the 31 minutes. Anyone can have a down night, but if he can jump from 20 to 31 minutes, there's a chance for an increase there. It might not hold out. They say Draymond's coming back. So maybe that, I don't know if that pushes him back to the bench, but they're still so, how do I say this? They have so little help there in Golden State that I can't imagine that they just vanquish him to nowhere. I expect him to be able to play some. But that's kind of just my theme of the night is I've played a handful of guys I think are decent plays for the matchups or system, but not a lot of guys I'm really excited about. I'm actually more interested in your lineup now, having gone through the 2 of them. Except Trey. I expect Trey will have a big night against Houston.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that game. I'm hoping it's not as big of a gap as it was last time, because then Trey's going to, if Atlanta's still in it, Trey's still going to be shooting. But last time, like I said, it was 158 to 111. So I think Trey only played 30 minutes that game. So he still put up good value in that game just because there's a lot of points going around. But no, I'm hoping the game is a lot closer this time because I would love to see a 133 to 142 game.
The only player, here's where we're wrapping up, that we didn't talk about that I also tried to get in my lineup and couldn't quite swing the 9,000. But I think Nikola Vucevic is going to have a big night. The last 2 times Vuce's gone against Washington, he's averaged 53 fantasy points, which is nothing to laugh at. And he's coming off of a super consistent block of 47.75, 47.75, and 48. So he's right in there every time. Now at 9,000, that's not at 6 times value, but those were against Miami and Utah with good defenses, and then Brooklyn. So if he can play against Washington with a bad defense and all of their big men are hurt, right? Mo's still out. Davis Bertans is out. And then Rui's out. Not that a rookie, a tall rookie was really going to be something scary off. So I think it's a really plus matchup if you can swing that 9,000 in there. Or even just a lineup like yours, try Jokic in one and then switch to Vooch is the second lineup,
Mm-hmm.
just in case one of them really spikes. There could be something there. You have anyone else you want to call out while we're talking that we maybe didn't get to address?
Yeah, one guy who's really been playing really well, honestly, Alonzo Ball. 7,400, kind of looking at the last 3 games, or last 4 games, 43 fantasy points, 55 fantasy points, 37.5, and then 65 against Houston, the Lakers, Sacramento, and Utah. But against Utah, I would have expected a lower score. To put up 43 fantasy points, that's pretty good against Utah. So Lonzo Ball is kind of on a hot streak. He's going up against Chicago, which Chicago plays good against the guards. But, a guy coming in that's on a hot streak, anything can happen, especially with his shooting, the way he shoots. I don't know how you can block. I mean, it's just, it's all over the place.
Yeah, he changed it a little bit. It's not quite by his hip like it used to be, but it's still in flux. It's Fred Vinson. His last name is Vinson, not Vincent like you'd call someone Vince. But he's the assistant coach there at the Pelicans that many people have credited as like really being like a shooting guru, being able to help these guys along. And it seems to be working, which is great. But yeah, it still looks awkward when it comes off.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's leave it there. Good luck to you in your matchup. And, I'm sure you and I will be texting each other as lineups get close, as there's all the announcements.
Yeah.
And good luck to anyone else listening.
That's what it is with fantasy. You always have to be ready to punt left or right, depending on injuries. So.
All right. Good luck. Good to be back doing this again. Thanks for joining us.